Joshua Hyland is a highly experienced biohacker, fitness trainer, and holistic health coach known for his innovative approach to health optimization. He works with elite professionals, including world-renowned musical and theatrical artists, helping them achieve physical and spiritual balance. Joshua is the founder of several fitness and health entities and is the global ambassador for Technogym. He's dedicated to advancing the fields of health, wellness, fitness, and lifestyle. His philosophy revolves around awareness through experience, focusing on the alignment of body, mind, and spirit to achieve optimal wellness. Joshua's approach combines state-of-the-art fitness with deep knowledge of healing modalities, aiming to restore clients to their prime physical and spiritual health. He leads a team of elite trainers at System Fit in New York City and offers both in-person and virtual consultations for clients worldwide. Thank you so much for being here. It's so nice to have you on the show. Welcome to Broad's podcast.
Thank you. I'm very thrilled to be here. So thanks for inviting me. And I know we haven't had a chance to like see each other since the first time we met, but yeah. I love following your journey. And, briefly, we were talking about you following the journeys that we did with the Speed Project and whatnot, but it's been really exciting to get to know you through your content while also knowing you a little bit in the real life. It's been really fun. So thank you for doing what you do.
Of course, yes. And more connections and more stuff together in the future, that's for sure. So Absolutely. We're here about you. So you're all about health optimization from the ground up. You talk about that a lot. So what do you feel like is the first thing people are doing wrong when it comes to their health and wellness?
Ooh, okay. Great question. And I would like to rephrase it if you're okay with that.
Of course.
Because I try not to be the person that says to anyone that you're doing something wrong, but maybe there's ways we can do things differently or better, right? Yeah. And obviously, I think you probably know where I'm going to go with this, but being that I'm such a barefoot foot health proponent, it's something that was a huge piece to my career and my life. My journey in the barefoot world is like going through sports. Like I grew up in martial arts, and I say I grew up in it because my father was a sensei and I started when I was 4 years old. And the martial arts world is all about being barefoot, right? And then as I started to become more well-versed around foot health and going through the ranks throughout Vivo Barefoot and the coaching program, I started to understand that many of the complex sports of today are done barefoot. If you think about like ballet, if you think about martial arts and gymnastics, things like that, right? And it makes sense to me because this is the thing that, if you want the ultimate feedback and what's happening in your body and proprioception, just knowing where we are in space, then being barefoot it's like the obvious choice, right? But in today's world, we obviously can't be completely barefoot because of sticks and rocks and stones and glass and all that kind, maybe even needles in certain cities. We obviously need to have a layer of protection, but it's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We hear, we need to protect our feet, and we go into the things that we see in the world today, which are these really thick cushioned soles. And I think that dumbs down the information that goes from the sensory receptors in the bottom of the feet that have to travel up to the brain and back to create a response. And so every bit of layer or padding or cushion or whatever you want to call it underneath the foot, it slows down that the traveling of that signal from the feet up to the brain and back to the limbs and whatnot, So I think that's something that we could all improve upon. And it's like the lowest hanging fruit, I think, because if we're actually barefoot with no shoes or socks, then we get, and we're out in nature, which hopefully we are all incorporating into our lifestyle, then not only do we get the freedom of movement with our feet, but we also get the grounding effect, which is another big thing for me, right? I've been a grounding proponent for 15 years or so. Mm-hmm. And, I sleep with a grounding mat, and I'm grounding all the time. And I prefer to do it in nature. Hopefully we're in a bit of the world where we can go out and do those kind of things. And if not, then there's modern technology. You can get grounding shoes, which we have at Vivo Barefoot now, finally. And there's other ways you can do that. So I think that answers the question in a very long-winded way.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say like it's a low barrier to entry, because it is. And it might not be, because we are in shoes all day long. And if you told me, all right, Tara, you have to be barefoot like all day today, that would be really hard. So what do you feel like is the easiest way to kind of ease into barefoot training or just barefoot living?
So I would, okay, very good point and very good question.
Yeah.
And so I get into like trainer mode or
Yeah.
health coach mode, right? And so when I'm faced with a response like that or a comment like that, I would most likely follow that up with a question. And that question would be, well, why is it too hard for you to do that? Why do you assume or perceive that it might be hard to do that? And then there's obviously going to be certain levels of response to that, and then that's where I address the point. And sometimes some of those responses I hear is that barefoot shoes just don't look good. Well, okay. Have you tried? Have you seen all the styles that are out there today? I mean, there's a lot of cool looking shoes. And so, are we allowing fashion or our taste in fashion, are we allowing that to be at the detriment of our health and wellness? Like, if you want to truly optimize your health and wellness, then let's forget about what it looks like, because we in today's world we can go out to a 3D printer and print something immediately, right?
Yeah.
But it's all about allowing your base of support, which as we get older, the older population, that's a critical thing, is falling, right? If you fall, you're at very much at risk at dying, right? And I know it sounds a bit morbid, but it's true. Well, if you want to focus on that and live as long as you can and thrive as long as you can, then preventing falling is pretty easy to do, barring that we don't step on something or trip on something, right? But you have a better capacity to not have that happen or to heal from that the stronger we are from the feet up. So as our feet get stronger, then our ankles get stronger, so that if you do roll your ankle, heaven forbid, then you bounce back from that a little bit better. So the stronger we are, the more resilient we are, I feel like that's what we should be trying to achieve. And resiliency starts from our feet. It's what we move upon day to day. Whether you're working at a hospital, standing on your feet all day long, or you're sitting at a desk, hopefully you're getting up and getting down. And we should never be wearing shoes indoors. Like, this is one of those things, like, shoes were built for protection, right? And some people will say for support. But our feet were designed perfectly with all the support it ever needed, as long as we allow it to do what it's supposed to do. And so starting with the feet is like one of those things where, like, I get it. It might sound weird to go running on concrete, like one of the common debunks we hear, or, potential debunks is that our ancestors didn't have to live upon concrete like we do today, right? But we also have the capacity to adapt to that, right? I would rather us adapt to being on concrete versus adapting to conventional shoes just because it looks different, just because it looks fashionable, just because, some high level athlete that you follow is wearing it. It's, if we really truly understand why shoes were built in the first place, we can go back to the earliest inventions of shoes, and they look, literally, it was just like animal hide and rope, right? But somehow it got to like these things that we walk on that our body doesn't even really recognize, and there's this you've probably seen it before on social media, but there's this video clip that I like to use when I do presentations that shows dogs putting on booties for the first time, right? And they sit there and they're like, tick, 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 tick. Like, they don't know what to do, right? Because it's like all of their sensory input that they need, right? We have the sensory receptors for input for a reason. And so when you don't have that, or it's dulled down or dumbed down a little bit, then it throws off our gait. And so, we go to these shoe stores today, and we have these, like, young kids, maybe they're not all young kids, but we have these people who really don't have any business trying to coach a person into what shoe to wear. But because, one of the top sponsors might be one of the biggest shoe brands, they're going to send them to that because it's got, arch support and motion control and, pronation and supination. They don't know what they're talking about. Some of them probably do, right? But it's interesting that when we put our foot into a shoe, that's going to change the way the foot moves. But it's interesting, right? Like you get on a treadmill at a store, they video you from behind to monitor if you're rolling out or rolling in, but they don't really consider that the shoe is maybe making the person do that, right? And so, I don't think it's wise to tell someone to be in a shoe that controls this when you should be doing that yourself. We should be training ourselves, and then we put on a shoe for protection, So I can go on and on and on and on about that. But yeah, I don't think it has to be perceived as being too difficult to get started, period.
I totally agree with you. And what if people are so used to walking in the shoes? And we talked offline about this, like running in barefoot shoes is a very different experience than running in running shoes, right? And so we had talked about offline how I can kind of slowly get to the place where I feel comfortable just running in barefoot shoes and I'm not hurt for long periods of time, or I don't feel like it's like so hard. So can you give some tips of how people can kind of ease into it?
Yes. You're dead on by laying out the framework for this notion that there is a difference between walking or everyday living, maybe even just working out in the gym or whatnot, versus running in barefoot shoes. And to touch on that point, if you and your audience are interested, I hosted this barefoot running guide on the Vivo Barefoot platform, so we can give access to that if people are interested, or at least link to it and they can kind of check it out. But that lays out an amazing framework for how to transition properly.
Mhm.
But outside of that, I can explain it this way. So comfort is an important word here.
Yeah.
There's a great book. I think his name is Michael Easter, wrote the book, The Comfort Crisis.
Okay.
Right. And The Comfort Crisis is one of those books that should wake everyone up to kind of realize that in modern society, it's hard for us to like not have our air condition blasting in the middle of the summer and having our heat blasting in the middle of the winter, because we're always searching for comfort. We've got luggage that we need to carry around because we got to have all of our stuff. But, we put the luggage on wheels because, we have to wheel the luggage to the escalator that takes us up, or the elevator, to then sit on a plane for a long period of time, to then sit in a car, to then do all these things. And so the whole idea is that we in modern society, sure, some people have it very tough, but we're in a constant search of comfort.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that's optimizing our health and wellness though, right? So when we run or even exercise and walk around in shoes that are very padded and very cushioned, what we don't realize is that just because it's more comfortable doesn't mean that the ground reaction force disappears. It doesn't disappear. It just goes into different parts of the body, or parts of our body feel it more so than it would otherwise, right? When you're barefoot and you accidentally strike your heel too much while you're running, you feel that. You feel it, right? And it doesn't mean that you don't do it. It depends on how well you're built up and adapted to that. But if you're new to doing it and I ask you to go and run on the concrete in bare feet, no shoes and no socks, chances are you're going to do it right more times than you would do it wrong. And if you did all of a sudden try to do the same technique that you do in your running shoes, I'm a fast runner. Okay, take off your shoes and socks and go run. I mean, I wouldn't have a person do that because obviously, it runs a risk of injuring someone. But
Right.
You get the idea. The idea is that, oh, that's our check engine light. That's a warning sign to tell us like, wait a minute, something's not right here. So then you start to maybe change the frequency of the strides, right? So we get a little bit faster, and not faster as in, from point A to point B, but the faster cadence, right? And that's something that we teach. So in our teaching profile, we teach posture, so proper posture. We teach rhythm, and we teach people how to relax into it. And so what might seem to be something that is like completely foreign to us, although we were born to run, it's like we have to just relearn all of these things, just like we would have to learn how to do a muscle up, or just like we'd have to learn how to hula hoop. We can't expect to just immediately know how to do it just because we were born to do it. And so I would just encourage people to maybe spend time walking in their barefoot running shoe, right? Just walk in it for however long you need to, until the point that you don't really feel it anymore, right? Like when it feels normal to put on that barefoot shoe, or to be barefoot more in nature, then you can slowly start ramping up your distance walking, your speed walking, and then eventually running slowly, right? Maybe running for a minute and then, walking for 30 seconds or a minute, go back and forth. And while this might sound very like remedial for a lot of people, trust me, if you have been in the situation I've been in, when I first learned about Vivo Barefoot and I got certified to become a coach, I went and did like this most amazing run and sprints, and I did all these things, and I could barely walk for the few days after that because my calves were so sore, right? But I learned from that. I learned that, like, just like if I were to go and do, 1,000 pull-ups for some reason, right? Which might be analogous to how many steps you would take if you do run for distance. I'm going to be freaking sore. I probably won't even be able to finish it. So we wouldn't do that with pull-ups or muscle ups or front squat thrusters. But why would we do that in a running shoe? Or, a barefoot shoe in general? We shouldn't. We should transition. So that is one of the big things that I can encourage anybody listening to this or watching this. Learn to transition properly. Patience is a virtue. And it's just like any other part of our body that has muscles, bones, tendons, and ligaments. It needs to be trained and trained properly.
I love that. That's so great. It's so funny you say that, because I did a sprint interval workout on the track in the running shoes. And I swear to you, my calves even today are just like so sore. And I have been walking in the barefoot shoes more often, but that was the first time like doing a sprint interval on the track, and it felt really good in the moment. But I'm like, oh, the calves. Yeah, he's talking about my calves right now.
Yeah. And what's cool about that, right? Like, you being someone who's well-versed in exercise and movement, what should happen there is like this light bulb that comes on and go, oh, well, that makes sense that it's doing that, because new muscles are being activated. And if you're sprinting, you're really activating those muscles, right? Yeah. And so this is why I say to people, because there was a lady at an event once, and I can't exactly remember what the question was or the comment was, but it was something along the lines of, hey, do you have like, different types of shoes that is maybe better geared for movement? Because I think I got the wrong size or something, because my calves and my Achilles are so sore. And I'm like, well, are you like, have you been wearing Vivo Barefoot or barefoot shoes for a while? She's like, oh, no. I just bought these and they're amazing. But I got so excited that I went and I did an incline walk for 30 minutes. And then I did heel sprints on the treadmill. And she was like, and it was amazing. She was like, but I don't know. I think something's wrong. And I'm like, whoa. First of all, I don't know who suggested you to do that, but I want to be the first to tell you, do not do that again, please. Yeah. Take your time, start by walking for an hour, and then recover like you would from a workout, right? Because it is a workout for the feet. And so I just think that, like, we should all respect what that is, just like it's a workout. So work out for your feet.
Absolutely. Gosh, I feel like we had to have the whole podcast about feet, but I want to talk so much more about biohacking. Even the fact that your tongue is blue, you're wearing these glasses. I'm like, okay, let's talk about biohacking. First of all, what is biohacking? Like, how could you describe it to people?
Well, okay. Biohacking has many different definitions and many different iterations, I look at biohacking as like a spectrum. And so, in fact, I'm going to start doing some content around that, which is this notion of like, how much biohacking can we do out in nature? So like kind of the ancestral way of doing it. Mm-hmm. And then how does that compare to like modern science and modern technology? And then the next level, like the Brian Johnsons of the world that really push the limits. Because I feel like there's been this sort of negative connotation around the word biohacking for a little bit because everyone thinks it's all about gadgets and sure, or all about supplements and whatever. And I like to say that biohacking is sort of this modern day twist on being a guinea pig, in which we all are, right? If you've changed the temperature in your home, you're a biohacker. You've affected your environment, right? To benefit you in some way or another. If you've ever turned on a light or turned off a light when it's too dark inside, you're a biohacker, right? If you've weighed yourself, you've gone on a scale, you're a biohacker. So it doesn't have to be the level at which I do certain things, right? But what I like to do is I've been a curious person since I was a little boy. And I used to love the show Curious George, the cartoon. And so growing up, I would eat bananas a lot and I was called Curious Josh. And I'm still Curious Josh to this day. And so I like to try to find ways to move the needle in the right direction, to get a little bit of an edge. And if that is something I'm willing to do for myself, and then I turn that information, my experiential information, to my community and they decide to try it, okay, cool. And doesn't mean that like, because I take 20 different supplements and I have an apartment full of equipment and whatnot, doesn't mean that a person has to do that. But I can tell you this, most of my clients and most of the people that subscribe to either my YouTube channel or my IG, they are getting real information and they get to pick and choose what they want to try to move the needle on, you know? And I always like to think of like, are you that person that someone wants to call upon when shit hits the fan? Or I don't know if you curse on here, but you know what I mean? Like when things go wrong, whether with your health or in your environment, are you going to be that person that people call on? That's real engagement. That's real like influence, I think. And so, like during the pandemic, there was a lot of people calling me, lots of people calling me. I can tell you that, right? And I was fortunate enough to get through it with no issues. Okay. I'll just leave it there. And then, if there's I work with lots of different celebrities and, it's not that working with a celebrity makes me any better than any other trainer or health coach. But if you can imagine the access that these people have at a high level, they can work with anyone. But why is it they choose to work with me? It's mostly because I have a wide variety of knowledge and experience. Because the knowledge is one piece of the puzzle. I could rattle off all these fancy words and scientific terms, but at the end of the day, we're losing people, right? So how can I relate to the person who's listening, who really has a question? And I would encourage anybody watching or listening right now, if you've got questions for me or for Tara, reach out. That's what community engagement is all about, And I love watching your posts, and I know people are into it. So I challenge anybody listening or watching right now to reach out if you've got burning questions. Why is my tongue blue? Well, it's methylene blue. Okay. Why am I wearing these glasses? The glasses is because I'm staring at a screen right now, which is not natural to the human body or the human mind, brain, especially for this amount of time. So these glasses allow for the beneficial light throughout the day to offset our circadian rhythm, right? Because during the early parts of the day, when we wake up, we have, adrenaline, our sympathetic nervous system is engaged. We have spikes in cortisol, and this is to wake us up and to give us the energy to go out and hunt, right? Now, hunting might look different for me and you than it does for the average person who sits at a desk, but the idea is that our evolutionary sort of mind is geared for hunting, right? And then eating, and then living and thriving and procreating. It doesn't matter if you are a content creator or a model or whatever, an actor, it doesn't matter. So the goal is that we eventually reduce the cortisol in the sympathetic nervous system drive, and we switch into melatonin release, parasympathetic nervous system response, which is rest and digest. And that's the perfect time to then go to sleep and do it all over again. But because we have lights and we have all these screens and things like that, our bodies and our eyes, which receive a lot of information, a lot of sensory receptors in the eyes as well, it's receiving information constantly, right? And so if there's bright lights on and there's computer screens in front of our face 24/7, when is our body supposed to ever release melatonin and allow us to truthfully go to sleep? It doesn't. It's hard to do that. So I do this to block out some of the harmful light, but then this allows for the beneficial light to come in during the day. And then I switch to, if I'm outside, they have this company, Raw Optics. They have this new technology called Blue Sync, which is geared for outdoors. The yellow ones are geared more towards the daytime indoors. The blue ones are more for outdoor. So it lets even more of the beneficial light come in, but blocks the harmful spectrum. And then it's kind of energizing. And then you switch to the red light. Again, if we're indoors, mostly we're indoors. But if you happen to be out and about, you might catch me in the red glasses, and I might look like the hippie biohacker dude, but I'm not doing it for fashion. I'm doing it because this is my career. It's my life. It's my everything, So I have good sleep scores. I have a good HRV. I've got, all the things going for me. And people go, oh, like, why do you do all these things? Well, because I want to live a long time, and I don't want to just live. I want to thrive for a long time. And I get complimented on my skin a lot. I get complimented on the fact that I don't look my age. I'm 43 years old, going to be 44 soon, right? And people are always perplexed, like, what is it you do? Oh, it must be genetics. No. I mean, genetics have a factor in this. They play a role for sure. But my dad passed away, almost 2 years ago, and he was morbidly obese. He was over 500 pounds before he passed away. And then he dropped a lot of weight, whatever. And then my brother is a bit bigger than I am, doesn't have the best of skin, so it's not just the fact that I was born with good skin and I look young. It's because I take care of myself, and there's a number of things to do that. And the blue tongue, by the way, there's loads of information out there on the internet about methylene blue and the fact that it's aquarium tank cleaner. No, it's not. Okay, I mean, there are uses for aquariums or for fish tanks or whatever you call them, right? There are versions of that for it, but what we take is clinical grade. It's dosed properly. You may have also seen there was a viral clip that went out, I think from Paul Saladino, talking about, methylene blue might not be what it's cracked up to be because they did autopsies of a few people and they had blue brains and blue hearts. And it's the most grotesque images that are out there. But I think it's a little bit of fear mongering because these are at high doses. What I'm doing is essentially microdosing this stuff. And it's worked for me. In fact, again, it was one of the solutions I had during the pandemic. I'll just leave that there. Okay, park that. Okay, if anybody's got questions, we can talk about it. But just keep in mind that, I use things like Hoppe nasal spray. I use peptides. I use methylene blue and other nootropics. I use hyperbaric chambers and saunas, and the list goes on. And I can talk about all these things if you want, but at the helm of it is some of the lower hanging fruits are things like grounding and earthing and meditation and breath work and getting the right kind of water and understanding that we are electrical beings and we're vibratory beings as well. So anything that allows for vibration, be it walking, running, exercising, just moving around, fidgeting, that's helping with what our body wants and needs, right? So you can get the fancy equipment to help augment that, or you can just go and do the natural version of it, Sleep. So many people today have problems sleeping. Okay, let's start with the devices, the phones. Let's start with, either taking the phone away. People aren't going to do that. Maybe some do, but most people won't. But can people get glasses? Can people maybe, like if I showed you my phone here, I did a post on this on my Instagram, but like if you want to diminish some of the effect of the blue light, so you see this is a white screen, which is in the blue spectrum. But if I do that, oops, that's going to charge something. That was 2 clicks. I need to do 3 clicks for my phone. So if I do 2, 3, if I do that, now the screen turns red. So maybe I don't want to wear the red glasses, right? But if I'm going to be on my phone at night, then maybe you do want to learn how to make this happen. You can do that with your computer, your laptop, your iPad, your phone. And again, this is not perfect. It's not perfect because it doesn't do everything that it's supposed to do in terms of blocking that light, but it is closer to being perfect, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, please.
Awesome. Okay. You gave us so much. So first of all, what is grounding? What does that mean? Tell people what that is.
Okay. So grounding has also many different definitions or explanations. If we want to talk about it from like from a more esoteric foundation, then that is just understanding who you are, where you are, what your vision in life is, and just understanding the essence of you, right? That is being grounded in yourself, right? But if we want to go a little bit more specific to the human body and the technology of grounding, that is basically it. And people think it's always has to be your bare feet, but it doesn't have to be your bare feet. It can be any part of your skin, because our entire organ of our skin has this piezoelectric effect that is a high conductor if you're well hydrated. Okay, that's a big important point. If you're well hydrated, then your skin becomes the ultimate conductor. So you make that and the skin of your feet, the skin of your head, the skin of your body, okay, any part of it, if it touches the earth or any grounding product, then you're instantaneously grounded. Okay. What that means, and I'll try to break it down in the easiest way here, but how do we say? Okay. When we become inflamed, when we become stressed out, our cells produce or end up having more protons, more of a positive charge in a negative sense. Okay. Bear with me. So more protons, which is a plus sign, right? Positive charge, but it has a negative effect. So too many protons usually indicates some kind of trauma, injury, inflammation. And if we are systemically inflamed, we're going to have loads of protons all over the place. And usually what happens within a cell is it needs to be balanced like a battery or a capacitor, which has a positive and a negative charge. So positive sign, negative sign. That completes the circuit of the battery or the capacitor or the cell. And so if we've got all of these positive charges lining the cell, to make it stable, that cell needs to be stable, we need electrons or a negative charge to attach to it on the outside of the cell. So what ends up happening is if there's not enough electrons in the body, then these highly positive cells are unstable, which means they are all over the place, called free radicals. These free radicals are looking for its counterpart, right? It's looking for that negative charge. And so one good, easy way to put more electrons into the body is to ground yourself, period. So if we understand that, my voice cracked. Am I 16? 13? If we understand that inflammation is at the heart of most disease in today's world, then reducing inflammation is going to be the key to living longer. Period, point blank. Mm-hmm. One of the easiest ways to do that is to ground ourselves. It's not a cure-all. It's not going to fix everything, but it's a good start. It kind of helps you to have a blank slate. Also, it helps with that parasympathetic nervous system reset that we need, right? So that's the reason why I sleep with my whole bed is grounded, right? So I have grounding sheets, grounded pillowcases, a grounding pad, and that's literally just a mat that's made of carbon. People think it's plastic, but it's not. It's a carbon mat that plugs into the wall. And in America, especially in America, we're familiar with seeing a plug, like an outlet that has two vertical slits and then one circle at the bottom. That circle at the bottom is the grounding port. Has nothing to do with the electricity. This is one thing that we should understand. That is connected to the grounding function or the grounding pole of the building that we live in. So every single building has to be up to code, and being up to code means it has to be grounded, right? Modern buildings. And so anytime you plug something in, if we didn't have a grounding port, then we have the risk of like blowing the breaker or creating a fire. Too much energy is going in without the balance of the electrons, just like our bodies, right? So this is why it's really, really important. And then the drinking or the hydration, people think just drinking water is hydrating. It's not. We need electrolytes. Electrolytes is a fancy word for salts. Salts, plural, right? So some of those main salts are like the minerals and micronutrients that we get from things like shilajit and salt, like actually sea salt or ocean salt from nature. Like these are the things that we need to have because it's the closest thing to the plasma of our body, which helps and aids in circulation. So it's like, obviously I can go on and on and on and on and on, but the idea is that there's a lot of science behind it. We can talk through it until the cows come home, but I think people should just get cleaner water, start grounding, get better sleep, reduce the EMF bombardment that is happening in our lives today. And there's ways to do that. If you don't believe it, just try it, see what happens.
Yeah. And we can go back to comfort is crisis, right? We only grow and evolve and are able to live longer when we are uncomfortable. And that is how, we can just be better humans. So we've talked about longevity a lot. First of all, what age do you want? Like if you had a number in mind that you're like, this is how old I want to be before I pass away, what would you say that would be?
If I'm being honest with you, I haven't
thought about it.
No. It's not that I haven't thought about it, but I haven't identified a number because to me, it feels too limiting.
Okay.
Right? Because if I said I'm going to live to 120, which we hear a lot, we hear some 180s and this and that. It's like, I want to live right now and I want to live as best I can for as long as I can. And, who would want to live to 120 but be, kept alive by machines and have to be wheeled around? Come on, that's not thriving.
Yeah.
So, I believe I'm going to live till old age, but I don't know what that is, and I might get hit by a car tomorrow. Who knows,
Yeah. So longevity is a buzzword right now, I think too, right? With biohacking. How would you describe that as how you're describing biohacking? Is it all of these things that can make you just feel better to live longer, or is there more to the word longevity?
I think there's definitely more to the term, at least from what I see. I think longevity is it's like a lower barrier to entry compared to biohacking.
Okay.
Because with longevity, that's something we can do without having any device, right?
Yeah.
We can practice all these things without having to have a device. I'm saying that not meaning that we have to have devices to do biohacking, but this is what most people think, right? So for me, longevity is just extending lifespan in a thriving way. I imagine being able to. So I have two small kids that live in Budapest, and my son is 6. My daughter's about to be 4. I would love nothing more than to be able to hang out with them and, run with them and lift with them and do all these things when they are adults, But the only way I can do that is to continue doing what I'm doing and to try to extend my longevity, And so I do take various different supplements to help with that, like things like exogenous ketones. I'm a big fan of various different brands, from the ketone esters to the 1,3-butanediol. Like there's so many different types out there, but the reason why I'm a big fan of plant medicine, because I feel like that helps to separate ourselves from the ego. Not that the ego is always a bad thing. It lets us know who we are. But if you've ever experienced ego dissolution or ego death, and how powerful that is to kind of map out the rest of the way we live our lives, or the way we live the rest of our lives, that was powerful. I didn't see a date. I didn't see a number on my age when I went through some of my most profound journeys, right? I learned lessons And I think there should be less mistakes and more lessons in life. And that's what longevity means to me.
Mm. I feel like you have so many things going on in your life, and you might be the person where if I were to talk to you and meet you on the street, or if I didn't know you at all, I'd be like, you're so interesting, have so much going on for you. Do you ever feel like it's hard for you to connect with other people because they don't see your world and what you're trying to do and accomplish?
I love that. First of all, thank you.
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of a compliment in there. And I think it is fascinating because one of the things that I sort of pride myself on is being very good with people. I can relate to people very well. And so I try not to allow that to creep in. Like my whole thing, what I feel within the marrow of my bones is that I want to always leave someone or some group of people better than when I first met them.
Mhm.
And that might be, I mean, I'm not saying that it's always happy and that people don't disagree with me. People disagree with me all the time. You know, I get questioned, I get weird looks and like, why are you wearing those shoes? And why are you, right? I get it, right? But I can show up and be the homeboy. I can show up and be the sports guy. I can show up and be the science educator, or I can show up and be the novice and learn, you
Mhm.
know? And so, like, I think ever since I was a little kid, I've always been a super, super highly empathetic person. And so much so that my brother's best friend growing up when I was really young, mind you, it was my brother's best friend, but he would spend time at our house every once in a while. And he had a speech impediment. He stuttered really bad. So I started stuttering. No one in our family stuttered, but
Mhm.
it was because I was so empathetic to a person's situation that I started to stutter. And when I talk about it, literally what's happening in my brain right now is I'm having to make sure I don't stutter right now. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's how interesting like things are to me. So when I see someone in pain, I can tell in a snap of a finger if someone is injured or if they maybe something happened and I go, hey, like, is everything okay? You hurt your ankle or looks like you're, and they're like, how did you notice that? Or I used to do this thing where, because I have scoliosis, so it's easy for me to identify if someone else has scoliosis. And so sometimes I try not to freak people out, but I'll go, hey, have you ever been to the chiropractor? Like, have you ever, had your back looked out? And they're like, no, why? Or yes, why? I'm like, well, I could be wrong, but it looks like you might have a little bit of scoliosis. Not that it's a bad thing because I have scoliosis. That's that immediate relating, right? So
Mhm.
now they're
Yeah.
not scared of like, what is he talking about? Well, when I first heard that I might have scoliosis, I thought it was a disease. And I was in high school and I was a class clown, but also one of the best students and best athletes. But I had to mix in the funny bit, right? And we had this substitute teacher who was a local chiropractor who had just moved to our town. I grew up in a town of 3,000 people, very small. So everyone knew everyone. And the teacher had mentioned, listen, I know I'm new to you guys. You don't know me yet, but I'm a local chiropractor. If you guys have any questions, whether it pertains to the study material or if you have any questions about chiropractic care, feel free to let me know. So because I was school was easy for me, I finished my work really fast. And now I'm just sitting around thinking like, man, this is boring. I can't wait till the bell rings. Let me go and talk to this teacher. So I go back again, me loving to connect with people. I go and I sit back and I'm like, hey, you know what? I get checked all the time for like back issues, but you know, I think I've like something's going on with my back because when I sit for a long period of time, I have this need to want to like wiggle, right? Because the body always wants to move. We're vibratory beings, right? And I didn't know all this back then, but I'm just like, something's up with my back. And he goes, all right, let's do the scoliosis check or whatever. So stand there, bend over, touch your toes. He looks at my back and he goes, okay, you passed that one. All good. He's like, now turn around for me. Stand up. He feels on my back and he goes, huh. He's like, hey, how about you come to my office, when you get some free time? And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. You can go have a seat. So I'm like, I wonder what that was about, right? So I go And eventually I get there and he takes x-rays. And so we know that the spine, if you look at the spine from the side, it's supposed to have this natural curvature to it, like this S shape, right?
Mhm.
When he showed me my x-ray, I couldn't distinguish between side view and front view. That's how much curvature was in my spine from front to back, right?
Mhm.
And so he's like, you have a slight case of scoliosis. And I'm like, scoliosis, like, what's that?
Yeah.
And he's like, it's nothing to worry about. Gives me some treatments. And I start to learn how to kind of correct my body, And, I knew I didn't want to do surgery right away, but eventually I started to learn the foundation training. I started to learn how to breathe to expand my rib cage, how to hang and push. And there's a thing called the Scroth method that I started practicing on. So again, I have a lot of experience and knowledge because I do so many things. And if anyone is curious about that, if you're dealing with scoliosis, please ask, because I'd love to help. Anyway, I don't even know what the question was, but I'm sure I answered it somewhere in there.
Yeah, you did. I mean, like, obviously, there's so many ways to go, and you've worked with so many people, but you've also had these experiences yourself. So, let's talk about fitness and movement. Obviously, we know you're a runner, and you have so many different ways to biohack. But what are you doing on a day-to-day basis, and how you work with all of your clients? Because, like you said, you work with some of these high-end athletes and celebrities, and what are you coaching them through?
Okay. So I swear I'll try to make this short. Um, so I haven't always been a runner, or at least I now know I haven't always been a runner. Let's put it
Mhm.
like that. Martial arts and basketball were my first two loves. Okay. Then as I started to fill up my athletic schedule throughout high school, it was wise to try to do another sport that would complement my basketball because I knew I was going to go, to play professional. So, okay, track and field was my thing. So I was a good runner. I was a good sprinter. I was decent middle distance, not so good long distance. I just didn't like it. Then fast forward to going to college. I went to college on a full academic scholarship and a full athletic scholarship to play basketball. And to make a little extra money on the side, like through Pell Grants and things like that, I decided to also run cross country. Big mistake because I'm not a distance guy. I wasn't a distance guy, right? So I opted out of that, but I was always the guy, like when we had to do preseason training for basketball, I was always the one that like crushing everyone in the runs. But no one ever really talked to me about form or shoes or anything like that. But when I started down my barefoot journey, I did realize that it is interesting that in track and field, at least, most of the shoes are very thin. Now they're narrow, but they're thin and they're flexible, right? And so I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And that was also a point in time when I was using what they call jump soles to because I always wanted to jump higher because dunking was like the big thing. And jump soles are these platforms that you attach to your regular shoe that keep you off your heels. Bad idea. Okay. I learned this out just similar to my experience with running in barefoot shoes, sprinting for the first time. That's similar to what I felt when I first used jump soles. So I'm walking around all day long playing basketball on these platforms. It was crazy. Anyway, I take all of that and I realize that, okay, if I want to become a good runner, I need to actually learn how to run. So one of my mentors in the running world, when I first got introduced to Vivo Barefoot, is a guy by the name of Lee Saxby. And he is, he was like one of the main educators for the brand for many years. And he actually helped to coach the Chris McDougall, who's the author of Born to Run. And he got a chance to work side by side with the Tara Umar runners that are featured in that book. And so that was when I began this whole journey of like learning how to run properly. And so I take that knowledge, understand that, I was very close to I was thinking I needed to get bunion surgery because I was always in narrow shoes, narrow basketball shoes, narrow track cleats or track spikes. And I thought like, I need to get bunion surgery. So Lee encouraged me, no, you don't, or at least you don't right now. Just do some foot exercises. These shoes have a wider toe box. Do toe yoga. We learned what toe yoga was and toga. And I started doing that. And I can announce that I don't have to ever get bunion surgery, and I'm not saying that the hump has completely gone away, still there a little bit, but it's a far cry from having to go and get surgery. So that's how I lead my sessions. Basically, I start with opening up the toes, opening up the feet, doing toe yoga, then working balance drills, allowing people to understand that the better balance we have, because the reason why balance is important is, if you think about what running is a series of 1-foot hops. So this is exactly what I say in a session or in a seminar. Running is a series of 1-foot hops. If you agree with me, then let's break down what is hopping. Everybody hop for me. So everyone starts hopping. And then I say, okay, everyone stop. And every single time I do this, I say, not one single person hopped on their heels in here. Why? Because it's very unnatural, right? Like, no one would ever really hop on their heels unless they're trying to be funny, like me, right? Like maybe I would do that. Okay, so if we go with hopping, it's a 4-foot strike that goes into the midfoot, and then eventually the kiss of the heel, and then repeat, right? At a certain rhythm. And I use that as the basis for running. So if we're hopping in place, or if you've ever jump roped, you watch a person, the only cues I really need to give them is like, hey, maybe don't jump as high, maybe jump a little quicker, allow your heels to fully express, your Achilles, your lower legs to fully express themselves by lengthening and then expanding and contracting. And then I have them go to 1-foot hops, because remember, running is a series of 1-foot hops. And that's when things start to really unfold. I get a chance to see what kind of athlete I have in front of me, because everyone's an athlete to some degree. And I start to see them move on, wobble all over the place. And I go, okay, was that difficult for you to do? Would you agree that that was difficult? Absolutely, that was difficult. Well, if running is a series of 1-foot hops, then why are you running if you can't master that? Because right now you're doing it with just your body weight. But when you're actually running, we're expressing 3, 4, 5, 6 times our body weight in force, right? In one leg. So if you can't do a pistol squat, you can't do a single leg squat, not to say that you shouldn't run, but you should reconsider building that up before you do go run, right?
Yeah.
And then not only are we doing that 10 times and then we switch to another exercise, if you're running and you're sprinting, you're doing 6 times your body weight multiple times. So we're talking 100 reps, 1,000 reps. If you're a fast runner, you're running a marathon, think about how many thousands of steps you're taking. That's like doing thousands of pistol squats. Eventually something's going to give, right?
Yeah.
And so I say to people, do this hopping. I even created this whole concept of what I call spot running, which is literally running in place, right? Everybody runs in place sometimes to do a warm up, but have you ever tried to run in place for 15 minutes? It's very interesting. It's very interesting, right? Because you're not going anywhere, right? But you're getting that impact. This is a good strategy to do actually barefoot in your home. It's what I do every time I get a pair of new shoes from Vivo. I do that to kind of break it in. Not that you need to break it in because they're already flexible, but it's a really good strategy for me to understand, like, oh, am I going to get a blister, or is this going to rub in the wrong way? I can do it in my home before going out and being in the middle of Central Park and have to walk back and, fully manifest a blister. So these are some of the strategies I like to pour out when it comes to running.
Okay. I love that. What about strength training?
What about it? Strength training is huge. But do you mean in relationship to running?
No, outside of running. Like, I'm talking with your clients, with yourself. We know muscle building is so important, and it's not just for certain people, just like running isn't. So where does that come into play in your training and with your clients?
Okay, I'm a huge proponent of calisthenics. So, which for people who don't know, it's mostly body weight, functional training, if you will. I'm a huge proponent of that. I love, like when people ask me, oh, okay, sure, body weight is great for, you can do push-ups to build your chest and your shoulders and your arms and triceps, and you can do squats to build your legs and things like that. But what about the posterior chain, which we need to focus on? One of my favorite exercises in calisthenics is a back bridge or back bend.
Mhm.
Not just doing it once and holding it like you would do in yoga, but repetitions, right? I challenge anybody to try it, because
Hard.
what's going to happen is you're going to quickly find out just how tight your shoulders are, just how tight your wrists and your elbows and your forearms are. And we're talking about working the posterior chain. But if you can't even get into the position, or if you can't get into the position and then out of it and then back into it multiple times, well, you got something to work on.
Yeah.
But if you can do it, it's a really good strategy for working the entire posterior chain. So if you want to work your full body, do things like pull-ups. If you've got access to a pull-up scenario, you don't have to always have a pull-up bar. How about try a tree? Get a
Yeah.
different grip without gloves. Right?
Yeah.
Things like I don't know if you're familiar with Tack Fit, but I love Tack Fit. I love MoveNat. I love the Foot Collective. There's so many things that we can do without even thinking about going to a gym, without even thinking about any tools, right?
Mhm.
But when it comes to real strength training, my favorite genre of strength training is isometrics.
Mm.
Okay. And what I mean by isometrics is not just the typical planks and wall sits like most people are probably thinking about when I say isometrics. Those are considered isometric movements, or lack thereof, right? But they are
Holds.
considered
Yeah.
isometrics, holds. But what I mean is things like the what is it called? The bow, iso bow, the iso bow.
Iso bow. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, I know what you're
So
talking about.
the iso bow is this little, like, it looks like an infinity symbol that has handles and connected to a strap. It's about this far apart if you're watching. I can hold it with my elbows out to the sides and my fists at my, my shoulders, and you pull on it and it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to move. It's not going to budge, because it's like it's stitched in a way that it's like a TRX strap. It's not going to go anywhere, right? But the idea there is that we pull as hard as we can for approximately 10 seconds. And there's this very fascinating thing in which the body won't allow you to go beyond its limits when you're going against yourself. It's really cool. And an example of that is, if people want to try this while they're watching or listening, just put your hands together at your chest with your elbows flared out a little bit. And what you want to try to do, so it's kind of like a prayer symbol, if you will. And what you want to try to do is push your right hand into your left and your left into your right, keeping your hands at your midline, pushing as hard as you can for 10 seconds. Let's try it for a second. Ready?
Yeah.
And go. Push. 1, 2, as hard as you can. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good. Now,
Sweating.
right? Me too. And
hard.
I did it so hard that I'm kind of cramping a little bit, but it's going away, right? But that was 10 seconds, and that was one movement, and no tools, but it's an isometrics. It's isometric. So you can do the same thing by grabbing a towel. You don't have to go and get a iso bow, even though it's only like $20. It's one of the tools I have with me all the time. I usually have 2 of them so I can have someone else try it. And I have some videos on my YouTube channel that show different workouts I like to do with it. I'm about to do another series that incorporates a squat hold while doing that, so that we can also work the legs. Because I do a few leg exercises with it, but if I'm being honest, I think the programming that is online and the programming that I came up with for the legs just doesn't quite cut it. So I'm doing a squat hold with some of those same holds with the iso bow to get the whole body involved. So I'm the kind of person that believes when we decide to exercise, we should be focusing on getting the most bang for our buck, for our time.
Yeah.
So for me, that's complex compound movements. And that's going through the movement milestones, knowing how to crawl properly, knowing how to fall properly. Back to what I was talking about previously.
Yeah.
If at some point we think we're going to fall, we should probably learn how to fall. Like a quick example of that is, one of my clients is Roger Waters of Pink Floyd. And I remember, this is kind of funny, but not so funny at the time, but funny looking back on it now. But we were doing a workout while he was on tour. We were in Philadelphia and we were working out, and there was a public gym in the hotel. He's doing step ups with dumbbells. And, I got him doing some really cool stuff. And I noticed just out of the corner of my eye, he was doing his last 1 or 2 sets, and he was stepping down. Instead of stepping straight down like you're supposed to, he was stepping kind of back a little bit and trying to get momentum into going into it. But where he was stepping wasn't close enough to like anything that was going to trip him up. Well, that last rep, when he came down, he basically stepped on the edge of like something that kind of almost made his ankle roll. And then this old man, right? I can say that because he's older, right? This guy literally rolls. And I was like, oh my gosh. First of all, I was like worried because like, oh my, like, is he hurt? Did he hit his head?
Yeah.
He's got to play tonight or tomorrow. And then I was so proud of that moment because he rolled out of it. And we kind of just sat there and we like, chuckled at each other. And then we obviously made sure that there's nothing else that's going to make that happen. But he was very proud of himself, because he didn't hurt himself and he rolled out of it. Anyway, that's, Like,
awesome. No, I love that. I love that. Man, there's so many things I'm going to look up after this. Can't wait. Okay.
hit me up anytime.
Yes. For someone who's just starting to focus on health optimization, biohacking, longevity, what do you feel like is the first thing that they can focus on like right now after hearing this conversation?
And this is someone who's new to all of this?
Yeah. Maybe beginner or kind of maybe just working out a little bit here and there.
Oh, my gut reaction is something we've already talked about, and that's grounding.
Okay.
Because with that comes so many other things.
Yeah.
Right. But maybe you can tell me if there's a certain sector of life we're talking about, because then I can maybe change that answer.
Let's talk about a 2 to 3 times a week general population worker outer. Maybe she's working from home most of the day. She's mid-30s.
Got it. Okay. Then I would certainly say, because this is something like I like to talk in ways that most people can do something.
Yeah.
And that is postprandial walks, right? Which is a fancy word for walking after eating.
Love it.
Right?
I love
that. That is something that we can all do, we should do. And here's the caveat. If you don't think you have the capacity to do so, as in you don't have enough time, you don't have the desire, the weather's crappy outside, whatever, then don't eat, because then you don't do the walk. Right?
Love it. Yeah. Period.
For me, you know what I mean? It's like, it's as simple as that, right? So it's like, if you are going to commit to putting something in your mouth that has an implication or, the capacity to store as fat, to store as fuel that wasn't used up, then if you're willing to do that, then you should be willing to go out for a run, go out for a walk, just go and move. And it doesn't mean you have to go outside. I would like for people to go outside to experience nature, but go up and down the stairwells. Go randomly, go do laundry, go fold clothes, do something.
Yeah. I love that. I actually had a podcast recently where I said the same thing. I said, sleep, water, movement, and movement of some sort. But yes, the best thing is like after a snack, after a meal, even if it's around the block, around your house, like anywhere, just like move your body after you eat. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Is there anything else you feel like we didn't talk about or you want to leave with the audience today? And then I'll tell everyone where to find you.
What I would like to do is truly create and continue creating community. I think we desperately need, as a society, we desperately need stronger community.
Yeah. And
a community that lifts each other up, truthfully, not just for the gram, not just for clout, right?
Yeah.
But like, I wish we could have more people doing what we're doing right now, which is, talking through concepts and not being so dogmatic about certain ideologies because it looks right on social media. Like, I would love to see more health and wellness retreats. I would love, like, there is a big trend in running groups and running clubs and things like
Yes.
that. And one of the things that we're doing, or a lot of the things we're doing at Vivo Barefoot, is building out communities. Before we started recording, I mentioned to you that, like, hey,
Yeah.
we're coming to Austin soon. So like get ready, because we're going to have to really build up the community. Right.
Yeah.
And so this is what I hope. I hope, and I'm not even saying that we can't have dissenters, that we can't have people that what we call like steel man certain topics. There's the steel man idea and there's the straw man idea, or maybe it's the steel person, straw person. But there's we do need the naysayers so that we can have interesting concepts. But don't be so close to your ideology that you get offended when someone challenges you. Look at that as an opportunity to educate. So I say, anytime there's a question, there's an opportunity to educate. And I'll leave you with this. One of the things I say almost every time I do a podcast or a talk, I came up with this idea of, it's kind of like a mission statement for me, but our bodies and minds adapt to what we do most of the time. If you want to change your body and mind, you must change what it is you do most of the time. And I live by that. And I have for so long. And so I can't get upset with myself or anyone else if the human body is designed to adapt to what we do all the time. Then if you want to make a change, and the key word there is if you want to make a change and you truly want to make a change, you got to change something, right? Change begets change. So that's kind of my outlook on life.
I love that. I love that. Where can people find you online and reach out and ask the questions that they want?
Yeah, please do. And thank you for the opportunity to share. You can find me on social media, basically all the major platforms at Joshua J. Holland. And I was fortunate enough to have that across all the platforms. My website is joshuajholland.com. The J in between Joshua and Holland is important because he goes to someone else, some actor named Joshua Holland. You can talk to him too if you want, but he probably won't give you the same response. And then I have a podcast called Simply Walk the Talk. So you can catch up on some of the novel concepts that I talk about and some of the long form conversations similar to this one. And yeah, I'm an open book, so ask away.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time and can't wait to connect more in real life.
Yes, thank you.